Traveling through the Great Qian, becoming the emperor of a country, only to find that the court is under control, and my own emperor is just a mascot. Fortunately, awakening the eternal emperor system and starting with 3,000 Xuanjia armies. Summon Yuwen Chengdu, smash the backbone of the powerful minister, summon Guan Yu, and open your eyes to kill. Liu Bu's halberd swept the world, and Li Yuanba angrily rebuked the invincible hand with a hammer. Not enough. Xiang Yu's spear is invincible, Qi Yu's magic sword travels 100,000 miles, Mencius writes about the world's affairs, and Laozi's entry into the holy world is shocking. What is an eternal emperor? That's it. Look at me, my 100,000 Xuanjia armor will amaze the world, and my million iron blood will step on the heavenly pass. Keywords of the novel. Puppet Emperor. At the beginning, summon 3,000 Xuanjia soldiers without pop-ups, puppet emperors. Summoning 3,000 Xuanjia armies at the beginning. Download the complete TXT collection, Puppet Emperor. Opening call of 3,000 Xuanjia army latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. The Eternal Emperor System, recommended for collection and follow-up. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. The Eternal Emperor System, recommended for collection and follow-up. Your Majesty, it's time for you to ascend to the throne. In a daze, Zhou Yuan heard a call. Quickly, everything around me woke up. What catches the eye is a magnificent palace. Beside him was a eunuch with a smile on his face, urging him. Just beneath this fake smile, there is a strong impatience hidden. Just as he was puzzled, he suddenly felt a headache, but within a few seconds, Zhou Yuan regained his senses. Looking at all of this again, there is no longer that sense of strangeness, but instead an endless anger in my heart. He traveled through time and became Zhou Yuan with the same name and surname. However, compared to him as an ordinary person, the Zhou Yuan he traveled through was the quasi-emperor that the Qian was about to ascend the throne. But what about the quasi-emperor? In his memory, he never felt the majesty of the crown prince, let alone the respect of his subordinates around him. Puppet Emperor. These 4 words were felt by him on his first day as the crown prince. Not only him, but since the late emperor fell seriously ill, the entire court has been controlled by 3 parties. A few years have passed now, and the late emperor has passed away. This situation of being controlled by the court has reached an even more heinous level. For example, the eunuch Xiao Dingzi in front of him, who is nominally his personal eunuch, is actually the confidant of the eunuch Wang Zhen. Once there is any disturbance, Wang Zhen can react. Not only that. The palace was controlled by the eunuch Wang Zhen, while the military power was in the hands of the general Yuwen Gong, while the civil officials were all in the hands of the grand preceptor. I know. Zhou Yuan nodded, his face expressionless. The current Great Depression is plagued by internal and external troubles, with ups and downs. He has no right to resist at all. Even her own crown princess, now the empress, was placed under house arrest in Shangyun Palace because she wanted to help her, and she could only meet her once in a month. Not willing to accept it. Zhou Yuan roared in his heart. What can I do if I am unwilling? Just a puppet, I don't have anyone who can use me. He has almost seen his future destiny. With this unwillingness, Zhou Yuan walked step by step towards the throne, which symbolized supreme authority. Along the way, there were ministers with diverse thoughts. Some people show mockery on their faces, some have compassion on their hearts, but only no one is angry. Tai Shirzai Feiqian, the old god, stayed at the head of the civil service, while General Yuwen Gong wore a sword around his waist and stood in front of the general with no one in his sight. Eunuch Wang Zhen stood by the throne and did not personally come down to welcome Zhou Yuan. He only vaguely welcomed him when he arrived at the throne. Before Zhou Yuan could speak, Wang Zhen sang loudly. Your Majesty has arrived, and the coronation ceremony has begun. This scene made Zhou Yuan grip his hands tightly. Now he's going to ascend the throne, but have you asked him? Is this ascending to the throne? It's clearly a demonstration. Suddenly, Zhou Yuan heard a ding sound. The host has ascended to the throne, and the One Emperor for All Ages system has officially begun. Zhou Yuan was stunned for a moment, then surprised. System. I actually have a system. I thought this so-called Emperor de Qian was just a puppet that could be played to death at any time, but I didn't expect that there would be no way out. And inside the main hall, many people saw Zhou Yuan's joyful expression. Tai Shi Zai Feiqian smiled. It was indeed a child's nature. What can one ascend to the throne of God? The world cannot be determined by a child. On the other hand, General Yuwen Gong sneered. Children achieve success. If it weren't for the Grand Tutor Zai Feiqian, this imperial throne would sooner or later be taken by my Yuwen family. Thinking of this, Yuwen Gong looked at Zai Feiqian's gaze with a hint of fear. This damn old thing. At this moment, Zhou Yuan seemed to have fallen into ecstasy due to his accession to the throne, but in fact, his entire mind had already sunk into the system. System, what is the Eternal Emperor system? Are there any rewards for beginners? The Eternal Emperor system aims to cultivate an Eternal Emperor. The host can consume Emperor's power to draw rewards and obtain resources to achieve the Eternal Emperor, including but not limited to martial arts, talents, pills, etc. Upon hearing the system's response, Zhou Yuan calmed down. The system is good, but the key still depends on oneself. System, check the current Emperor's power value. Host's current imperial power value 0.651. After testing, it was found that the host's prestige level is lower than the basic prestige level for ascending the throne. Therefore, 3 lucky draws will be given to the host watching the system display. Zhou Yuan felt a mockery from the system. But it doesn't matter. His gaze was fixed on the last sentence. Lottery. This is his only chance to change his fate against the odds. In the future, whether it's dragons or insects, let's just watch this time. Thinking of this, he didn't hesitate and directly opened the lottery system. System, give me a lottery. A chaotic turntable began to spin, with countless rewards inside that were dazzling. Quickly, the dust of the lottery settled. Congratulations to the host for obtaining Tang Xuanjia Army. 3,000, congratulations to the host for obtaining Strength. Hammer, congratulations to the host for obtaining Yuanqi Dan. Zhou Yuan's eyes lit up with a brilliant light. Where is the Xuanjia army? If these 3,000 Xuanjia soldiers were outside the main hall, he would really want to give it a try and see if he could kill both the Grand Tutor and the General here. The system rewards have been rationalized and arranged. The Yuanqi pill has been placed in the host's arms, accompanied by a powerful iron hammer. 3,000 Xuanjia soldiers have appeared outside the western city. That would be a pity. Zhou Yuan's eyes were filled with helplessness, not to mention that the entire Qianyuan city was under the control of the Grand General and the Grand Tutor. It will take over half an hour for 3,000 people to rush here. But at least, I have someone in my hands. But this is still far from enough. Zhou Yuan retrieved his mind from the system. The key now is how to obtain more imperial power points. Without imperial power, the lottery cannot be won, and the system naturally cannot exert its power. Looking at the many ministers under His Highness, Zhou Yuan's face returned to calm. At this moment, General Yuwen Gong stood up and proudly said, Your Majesty, now that the late Emperor has passed away, our hearts are in turmoil during the Qianyuan period. I request the Northern Army to enter the Qianyuan period and stabilize the people's hearts. Upon hearing these words, Grand Tutor Zai Feiqian couldn't sit still. Your Majesty, the Northern Army is a border army. If we withdraw from the border, how should we deal with the invasion of Dali? Moreover, since the establishment of the country, defending Qianyuan city has been the responsibility of the 4 Davids. Is it true that the general's words mean he wants to seize power and rebel? Zai Feiqian looked at Yuwen Gong coldly. He didn't expect that Yuwen Gong would take offense at this moment. The Qianyuan 4 guards were the only military power he held and the key to his resistance against Yuwen Gong. He only wanted to control the court, not to let Yuwen Gong conspire to usurp the throne. Yuwen Gong sneered coldly. Grand Tutor Zai, the 4 guards have been sparse in battle for a long time, and now they still have some combat power. However, it is difficult to say how they can protect your majesty in the event of a rebellion. The northern army's entry into Qianyuan was just a temporary measure, and once Qianyuan was stable, they would naturally withdraw. As for what you said about Dali. Yuwen Gong placed his hand on the sword, looked around, and proudly said. My son Yuwen Wei, more than a month ago, his battle spirit broke through and he has now entered the first level of battle spirit. The army of Dali has already been pushed back 70 miles by my son. As long as my son is here, who dares to invade? The battle spirit entered the first level, and the Dali army was forced to retreat 70 miles. For a moment, the court was full of discussions. This is a big deal. Immediately, a minister who was close to Yuwen Gong spoke up. Undoubtedly General Yuwen Wei, he is actually the first brave general of my Great Qian. With General Yuwen's father and son present, my Great Qian is as strong as gold and soup. Not bad, not bad. With General Yuwen here, I can rest comfortably. In the face of everyone's agreement, Yuwen Gong's face was even more proud, except for Taisher Zai Feichen's face, which was ugly. At this time, Yuwen Wei's entry into the first level has had a significant impact on the situation. At this moment, a minister with a sly expression walked out and bowed to Zhou Yuan, then said leisurely. Your Majesty, General Yuwen Wei's achievement in the first grade is a fortunate thing for me, De Qian. I boldly request my order and appoint General Yuwen Wei as the world's greatest warrior. Speaking, this person bowed and bowed, which was quite standard. Zhou Yuan's face was even uglier than that of Zai Feichen as he watched this scene. The #1 warrior in the world is not that easy to win. This world is different from his previous life, with all nations in the same dynasty and only a small fraction of the world. He is here to be crowned as the so-called #1 warrior in the world, isn't it just a laughingstock? Moreover, since ancient times, literature has no first place, and martial arts have no second place. This is even more ridiculous for those truly strong individuals, as some may have a bad temper and come to vent their anger in the middle of the night. This is forcing me to die. In an instant, Zhou Yuan looked at this person with a murderous intent in his eyes. Newcomer's new book, cough. Seeking support, I think it's good, make sure to collect and follow up on it, this is very important for the new book. Thank you in advance. Please rest assured to read the stable updates in the morning and evening before listing. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. I Want to Kill. Seeking collection, follow.up, recommended tickets, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. I Want to Kill. Seeking collection, follow.up, recommended tickets, looking at the minister in front of him, Zhou Yuan recalled the information about this person. Zhu Hongliang, whose identity was that of the Crown Prince Sharon, was in charge of the Crown Prince's documents before he ascended the throne. It can be said that it is one of his pure legitimate lineages. But Zhou Yuan never expected that as soon as he ascended the throne, he could not wait to change his family. Should be killed, really should be killed. The anger in Zhou Yuan's eyes was visible to everyone, but Zhu Hongliang's face remained unchanged. He doesn't feel like he did anything wrong. People move higher and water flows lower. It was impossible for him to become the Crown Prince's attendant back then. When the Crown Prince was born, he could still live and nourish himself with a few struggles. But now ascending the throne is equivalent to entering a chess game. If he doesn't quickly change his family, then he is truly a member of the emperor's family. As for the outcome, the uncle and son of the country who cannot even enter the main hall door are the best proof. As expected, he saw the satisfied smile on General Yuwen Gong's face and immediately bowed silently to Yuwen Gong. Yuwen Gong laughed heartily. Your Majesty, my son has extraordinary courage and unparalleled abilities. Please bestow upon him the title of the world's greatest warrior. Speaking of which, Yuwen Gong made a collection without distinction. Zhou Yuan was still in a difficult situation, and Grand Tutor Zai Feiqian stood up again. Your Majesty, the name of the world's greatest warrior should not be underestimated. Although General Yuwen Wei has already entered the first rank, whether he can bear the name of the world's greatest warrior remains to be debated. The Northern Army's entry into the Qianyuan era is even more absurd. As soon as Zai Feiqian spoke, the ministers of the Taisher faction immediately stood up and began to criticize. For a moment, both sides were engaged in a heated debate, really lively. But on the first day of his reign, Zhou Yuan, the Great Qian Emperor, seemed to have been forgotten. Eunuch Wang Zhen looked for a while. He certainly understands the current situation. Unlike the other two sides, ultimately, he still relies on imperial power. So now, he naturally wants to stand on the side of the Grand Tutor. After all, the Grand Preceptor is in power and they can cooperate, while the Grand General Yuwen Gong is in power and may not necessarily have a good day. Seeing the two sides arguing incessantly, he immediately stood up and shook the dust in his hands. A second-level battle aura suddenly swept across the hall, attracting everyone's attention. Silence. Today is the day of your Majesty's ascension to the throne, and it is unreasonable for you to be so noisy. After speaking, Wang Zhen looked at Zhou Yuan and smiled, saying, Your Majesty, why don't we discuss this matter another day? Zhou Yuan nodded. He has no right to refuse. But he glanced at the crowd and then spoke up. When I first ascended the throne, I felt deeply uneasy and wanted to build a 500-feather forest guard to guard the imperial palace. Do you have any opinions from the nobles' families? Upon hearing these words, before anyone else could speak, Wang Zhen spoke up. Your Majesty, the safety of the palace has always been the responsibility of the Xuanjia Guard. Why do we need an additional feather forest guard? If your Majesty needs it, why not expand the Xuanjia Guard to ensure that the palace is worry-free? Zhou Yuan did not take over. The selfishness of this old thing has already been exposed to the public. It is precisely because he cannot move a single member of the Xuanjia Guard that a new Yulen Guard needs to be formed. I also want to try their bottom line. Perhaps under the tripartite game, can he have a glimmer of hope? Even if it's just 500 people, with this beginning, things will always be much easier in the future. When Zhou Yuan was full of anticipation, Grand Tutor Zai Feiqian stood up. Your Majesty, the national treasury is currently empty, and I'm afraid it won't be enough to support a single guard. General Yuwen Gong, on this point, aligns with the target of Zai Feiqian and says, The Grand Tutor's words are good. If your Majesty needs them, we can mobilize 300,000 border troops at any time. 3 people, one by one, blocked Zhou Yuan's thoughts to death. There is no room left at all. Seeing this scene, Zhou Yuan looked around for a week. Is there not a usable person in this court? As he sighed, some of the courtiers gritted their teeth, their bodies trembling, and their hearts filled with grief and indignation. These bastards, they have contempt for imperial power to this extent. When many people looked up, they met Zhou Yuan's gaze and immediately lowered their heads in shame. At this moment, Dada, the sound of clothes moving echoed, and not far in front of him, a young civil servant stood up and respectfully bowed to the emperor. Grand Tutor, General, your Majesty's words are a common saying. One emperor and one courtier. Now that the previous emperor has passed away and the new emperor has ascended to the throne, why not build 500 feather forest guards? Even if the treasury is in trouble, and this is your Majesty's first order, why don't you all respect it? As he spoke, this person's gaze was like hunting, and he glanced at the two of them. His name is Lu Wenhan, and now he is just a small lieutenant general. He knows the consequences of standing up now, but a gentleman does something and doesn't. The emperor has never been ashamed of him, how could he stand there and watch? Seeing the minister stand up, Zhou Yuan's eyes sparkled. Okay. He was immensely uplifted in his heart. Sure enough, there are still loyal people in this court. However, for a moment, he couldn't remember the name of this person. Without giving anyone a chance to speak, Zhou Yuan said directly. What Ai Qing said is actually what I thought in my heart. I don't know Ai Qing's name and current position. Upon hearing Zhou Yuan's words, Lu Wenhan's expression was solemn. Your Majesty, I, Lu Wenhan, am currently a sergeant general. Zhou Yuan was excited, but Zai Feichen and Yuwen Gong looked ugly. Zai Feichen's gaze was cold. Lu Wenhan, this is a national proposal. How could you, a mere sergeant, have the right to speak up? Someone, drag it down and hit the 50 big board, as a warning to others. As soon as Zai Feichen ordered, a warrior from outside the palace walked in, intending to drag Lu Wenhan away. Don't bother. Lu Wenhan waved his sleeve and took the initiative to walk out. When he spoke, he knew the result and was prepared to be beaten or even dismissed from office. Zai Feichen snorted coldly and looked around, but no one dared to confront him. But at that moment, a voice that suppressed anger rang out. Wait. It was Zhou Yuan who spoke. Zhou Yuan stared coldly at Zai Feichen. Lu Wenhan is the only courtier who dares to step forward. The accusation of hitting the 50 great slabs is even more dispensable. If these 50 great slabs were really allowed to go down, how sad would loyal people in the world be? What level should his imperial power drop to? So, how could he agree? Zai Feichen raised his eyebrows. What is your Majesty's opinion? His voice was tinged with dissatisfaction. Zhou Yuan coldly said. Your Highness, Grand Preceptor, you have such great authority. This is the Qiankun Hall, not the Grand Preceptor's mansion. My minister just spoke up for me and said, I will be beaten 50 times. If that's the case, why don't I give you this throne to sit on? Zai Feichen hasn't said anything yet, and Yuwen Gong can't stand it anymore. The emperor's words were acceptable to him, just to increase his prestige, but not to Zai Feichen. Your Majesty is right, Master Zai, what do you want to do? Yuwen Gong spoke with displeasure. Zai Feichen looked at Yuwen Gong and cursed a fool in his heart. I don't even know if he was used by the emperor, but he didn't argue and just spoke up. Your Majesty is right, I understand my mistake. If that's the case, then let Lord Lu return. However, as a sergeant general, Lord Lu is responsible for investigating the troublemakers in Kyoto. I have heard that a murderer once killed someone on the street last year. Lord Lu only conducted a simple investigation and released them, which is not a small matter. Your Majesty, I request Captain Zhou to personally verify. Once confirmed, severe punishment will be imposed. What a Zai Feichen. Zhou Yuan's hair stood on end upon hearing this. He was just trying to save someone, so Zai Feichen directly attacked without giving anyone any chance to breathe. Regardless of whether this matter is true or false, once investigated, there can still be good news. Although Ting Wei is one of the 9 ministers, he is just a pawn in the wall. In this situation, how dare Ting Wei go against the wishes of both the Grand Tutor and the General at the same time? Lu Wenhan clearly understood this truth and his face turned pale. Upon hearing these words, Yuwen Gong also reacted and laughed heartily. Not bad, we should investigate carefully. He held his long sword and walked around the hall in a demonstration, with a simple meaning. Is there anyone else who wants to protect the emperor? Come forward and give it a try, see if this sword is not effective. Of course, no one dares to show their heads. Some people who had originally intended to stand up deeply lowered their heads. Upon hearing Yuwen Gong's words, Zhu Hongliang, who had just joined the General Yuwen Gong, his eyes twitched. Today was the day when he submitted his name and documents. But if he wants a bigger future, his previous performance alone is not enough. He tidied up his collar, stood up, and said to Zhou Yuandao. I think Lu Wenhan should be killed. This person has no eyes in court and speaks recklessly. This is a kill. Without the eyes of the Grand General and the Grand Tutor, speaking disrespectfully, this is a double kill. Without the eyes of the former emperor, how dare you say that the Xuanjia guard, which has been guarding the palace for decades, is useless. This is the 3 kills. With these 3 kills, not killing is not enough to appease the people's anger. Speaking, Zhu Hongliang knelt down to Zhou Yuan's body. Forcing the palace. What if it doesn't make sense? As long as the general and the Grand Tutor agree, that's enough. Now the general only needs a reason for standing up, and since there is no such reason normally, he will personally give it. It's not even necessary to have any results, just let the general see his attitude. With this achievement, he can naturally achieve great success. Lu Wenhan's pupils contracted slightly and his body was trembling. He couldn't even believe that this person could be so shameless. Even Zhou Yuan held onto the throne tightly with both hands, his fingers grasping fiercely. Okay, great. Zhu Hongliang. Zhou Yuan's anger is unforgivable. He's going to kill someone. Even if it's not within his plan. But if we don't kill De Qian, he won't be surnamed Zhou tomorrow. If any errors or omissions are found, please take action and click on the reader's correction button. The author will immediately make corrections. Thank you very much. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. This De Qian, surnamed Zhou. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. This De Qian, surnamed Zhou. Zhu Hongliang's words made General Yuwen Gong burst into laughter. This reason is outrageous. But he likes it. However, he is not foolish either. If someone accepts a petition, he will continue. It's still not possible to do this. Unless that old man Zai Feichen also agrees, wouldn't he be left to bear the blame alone? He relied not only on the sword in his hand for his Yuwen function to this point. However, he still looked at Zhu Hongliang with satisfaction. This person is quite good and can be reused. But at the same time, Zhou Yuan's gaze remained cold. Zhu Hongliang, did I ask you to speak? You are just a crown prince, how could I ever ask you to exit in court? You may say that Lu Wenhan is disrespectful, but when you speak, why don't you call him your Majesty? The Yuwen Guard is my private army. Even the crown prince's servants dare to intervene. Is it not good for me to wield a sword? Zhu Hongliang was stunned for a moment. But he didn't care. Now he's someone with a background, who cares about what a puppet emperor says. Without much sincerity, he immediately said. I know my guilt. After speaking, he stood up straight without waiting for Zhou Yuan's agreement. Knowledge of guilt. It's good to know one's guilt. Zhou Yuan sneered and looked around the hall before standing up amidst the surprised gazes of the crowd. Today is the first day of my ascension to the throne. According to our ancestors' traditions, we should proclaim our blessings, pay homage, call for longevity, and change our system. But what have you all done? Do you really think that this world is no longer surnamed Zhou? Zhou Yuan's face showed a hint of madness. Now he is completely useless in playing steadily, only by breaking through and standing up can he get a chance to catch his breath. So he wants everyone to know that he's crazy. Driven crazy by these damn ministers. Unless all 3 parties are prepared to usurp the throne, otherwise, this is his best way to break through the situation. Zai Feichen's face was strange, and Yuwen Gong's face showed mockery. Go ahead, the more you do, the faster you die. Only Wang Zhen's face was gloomy, and it didn't matter if the emperor went crazy alone. But if the emperor is gone, how can he still act recklessly? So although he cursed Zhou Yuanzili in his heart, he still spoke up. Your Majesty, we are currently in the court. If there is anything else, why don't we talk to the old servant after going to the court? But Zhou Yuan ignored him and glared angrily at Zhu Hongliang. Since you know your guilt, then punish according to your guilt. Someone, take Zhu Hongliang down and interrogate him in front of the palace. One sentence startled everyone. The emperor is really crazy. The current situation is so obvious, how can Zhu Hongliang kill him? Lu Wenhan was confused. Your Majesty, you can't be so tough. Imperial power is not used that way, let alone you don't have so much imperial power in your hands now. The ministers who secretly held grudges for Zhou Yuan were also confused, and many even had expectations for the new emperor. The ministers who hoped to one day clean up the powerful officials had a cold heart. The new emperor will probably die in the palace in just a few months if he acts like this. Zhou Yuan disregarded it. Seeing the warrior standing in front of the palace, Zhou Yuan directly drew his long sword. Why, if I have to do it myself, I won't be able to do it. No one will abide by my first decree of ascension. Unfortunately, no matter how angry he is, in the eyes of others, he is becoming more and more like a clown. Especially Zhu Hongliang, he was startled just now and felt a bit radical. What if the general sells him? Seeing the general shaking his head at the samurai in front of the palace, his heart calmed down. Even looking directly at the Emperor Qian in front of him, he almost spoke his heart out. What can you do to me? The main hall was silent, with only Zhou Yuan going crazy. After cursing angrily for a while, Zhou Yuan seemed to calm down and sat back on the throne. But the last trace of awe in the hearts of the ministers has also disappeared. It seems that no one has helped me execute the treacherous minister today. No one answered. Zhou Yuan looked at Zhu Hongliang with disdainful eyes, and suddenly a curve curved his lips. Since you don't want to take action, then I can only come by myself. Wang Zhen's eyebrows moved. Suddenly, Zhou Yuan pointed his right hand directly at Zhu Hongliang and let out a loud shout. Today, I want to let you know that the Qian is still surnamed Zhou. Where is the strength? Kill this sycophant minister for me. Zhu Hongliang sneered, luckily he was also startled. What kind of strength is there? Can you adjust one of the strength in the entire hall? Just as the thought flashed, a thunderous roar echoed from behind the hall. As ordered. Accompanied by loud cheers, a figure suddenly appeared from behind the hall, with a rugged face, charging towards Zhu Hongliang. This person is holding a large iron hammer with an iron chain in his right hand, and his body is like an iron tower. Every step he takes makes a loud roar. On your Majesty's order, execute flattering officials. At the moment when the three words, Zhu Yuchen, were spoken, the giant hammer had already landed on Zhu Hongliang's head. However, in an instant, Zhu Hongliang's head exploded like a watermelon. Bold. Yuwen Gong was both surprised and angry. He was surprised to find that Zhou Yuan's subordinates were still hiding such a master. To his anger, this person dared to be the one who killed him in the palace. Accompanied by this shock and anger, Yuwen Gong burst out with the peak of his third-rank combat energy. Pulling out the long sword from his waist, he swung it over. Faced with a fierce blow, the big iron hammer did not dodge, and the right-hand giant hammer slammed fiercely towards Yuwen Gong. Boom! A loud explosion. Yuwen Gong suddenly flew backwards, and after landing, he took several steps back and forth before finally standing steadily. The courtiers were shocked. Although Yuwen Gong may not have the strength of Yuwen Wei, he is also a true third-level powerhouse, with a body of courage that few people can match. Now he has been pushed back by a hammer. Second-grade power. Yuwen Gong gritted his teeth and said these words word by word. At the moment of exit, the courtiers looked horrified. There are only a few second-level civil and military officials in the Manchu dynasty, but I didn't expect the emperor to have such a level of backhand. Is this the foundation of the court? No wonder the emperor dared to kill so forcefully. It turns out that I'm not crazy, but I really have confidence. Not only were they surprised, but Zhou Yuan was also surprised. He originally thought that if the big hammer could have the power of 3rd or 4th grade and suddenly launch an assassin to kill Zhu Hongliang, it would be a foregone conclusion by then, and he would have a chance. I didn't expect the system to be so awesome. The 2nd grade power is enough to make him braver. The big hammer stood in front of the main hall, glaring angrily at Yuwen Gong. I have been ordered to execute the treacherous minister. If you take action at this moment, you are planning to rebel but fail. As he spoke, the huge hammer slammed heavily onto the ground, making a metallic explosion sound, with the intention of taking action if he didn't agree. Yuwen Gong's face changed. If this person were to kill him wholeheartedly, with the power of the 2nd grade, he might really die here. At this thought, he angrily said, unwilling to accept it. If my son were here, he would definitely shoot you. After speaking, Yuwen Gong hated to put away his sword. With this person, it would be difficult to do anything today. Zhou Yuanchang breathed a sigh of relief and felt extremely satisfied in his heart. Looking at the system again. Host. Zhou Yuan identity. Emperor Daqian level. Grade 9 lower skills. Qianyuan fist technique, Chongqing sword technique D-Wei value. 1359 character. Big Hammer Army. Xuanjia Army 3000. The Emperor's power value has directly increased from affiliated to 1359, which can be said to be a great leap. However, he also knew that the reason for crossing such a large distance was due to the emergence of the Great Hammer, which shattered the court's understanding of him, or in other words, the foundation of the Qian royal family. Such an opportunity may not be available again in the future. But that's already enough. System, give me a draw. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Yuwen Chengdu, Meet Your Majesty. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Yuwen Chengdu, Meet Your Majesty. The minimum level required for the system lottery is 100 points. After some consideration, Zhou Yuan decided to draw 3 times with 100 points and once with 1000 points. With Zhou Yuan's command, the system quickly flashed. Congratulations to the host for obtaining. Skill, Sunflower Classic, congratulations to the host for obtaining. Foundation Building Pill *3, congratulations to the host for obtaining. Euphorbia *500, 500 halberds. Although I don't know which one is stronger or weaker than the Xuanjia army, it is still absolutely elite. There is also the Building Foundation Pill, which is a 4-grade pill and extremely precious. Even if it is not as valuable as the Tianyuan pill, which can directly enhance a person's strength, it is also a rare treasure medicine. Also Sunflower Encyclopedia. Zhou Yuan calmly glanced at Wang Zhen. Eunuchs are the last line of defense to protect the emperor. Wang Zhen is not trustworthy, but with the Sunflower Treasure and Foundation Building Pill, he can support true trusted eunuchs. But none of these are the key. System, invest 1000 points, give me a draw. Being able to draw so many good things with 100 points of Emperor's power has increased his expectations for this draw. The requirements are not high, as long as he can have another 2nd-level strong person like a big hammer, he can have peace of mind in a short period of time. Congratulations to the host for obtaining. The first warrior of the Great Sui dynasty, Yuwen Chengdu. Upon seeing these 4 words, Zhou Yuan's eyes lit up and he clicked on the detailed information. Name. Yuwen Chengdu, title. The first warrior of the Sui dynasty and the general of Tianbao level. First class, national scholar, weapon. Phoenix winged gold. Plated tang current location information. In the wilderness, waiting for call outside the palace, 1st grade combat power, the capital of a national warrior. Zhou Yuan looked at General Yuwen Gong. He didn't forget that not long ago, this old dog said that his son Yuwen Wei was promoted to the 1st rank and wanted the title of the world's first warrior. Coincidentally, he also wants to see who is stronger between Yuwen Chengdu and Yuwen Wei. A large iron hammer was serving on the side, with two watermelon-sized diamond hammers in hand. The copper bell had big eyes and tiger eyes on the courtiers. When many people met his eyes, they all lowered their heads in a guilty state. But not everyone is afraid. The second-level combat power is indeed formidable, but it is not invincible. Tai Shi Zai Feichen squinted his eyes, with a smile on his brows and eyes, wondering what he was thinking. Yuwen Gong glanced at the big hammer, then at Zhou Yuan, and stood up and said, "Your Majesty, since the treacherous minister has already died, there should also be a dispute over Lu Wenhan's matter." Zhou Yuan looked at him and spat out two words. "It's not urgent. Lu Wenhan wants to be protected, but it's not easy. A Zhu Hongliang's head is not enough to scare the captain." Yuwen Gong didn't care and continued, saying, "A mere Lu Wenhan is really nothing, but your Majesty, the White Lotus sect in the Nanling Mountain has started an uprising, and now it has gathered hundreds of thousands of people. It has swept across the 3 counties with great momentum. Since the Northern Army is not allowed to enter the customs, what solution does your Majesty have?" Grand Tutor Zai Feichen widened his eyes, he didn't know about it. White Lotus sect uprising. Zhou Yuan's voice rose a bit, almost unable to catch a breath. Mad, a cult uprising that has even swept across 3 counties, he surprisingly did not hear any news. What are these wastes for eating? No, Zhou Yuan, calm down. The situation is very obvious, this matter has been suppressed by Yuwen Gong for today. Yuwen Gong looked proudly at Zhou Yuan and the courtiers. The border war has lasted for more than a decade, and all the armies that can fight in the world have already entered the border army. More than 100,000 people, aren't you not letting the Northern Army enter the border? I'll see how you handle it. Zai Feichen's face was ugly, but he also knew that the current situation was difficult to get off, and he had been teased by Yuwen Gong. There's nothing he can do, he sighed and stood up, saying, "Your Majesty, we have to guard against the matter of the White Lotus sect. In my opinion, it would be better to have General Yuwen Wei lead 50,000 northern troops into Lingnan to quell the rebellion." As soon as Zai Feichen spoke, the other courtiers stepped out and said in unison, "The Grand Tutor's words are extremely accurate. I hope your Majesty can mobilize the Northern Army into Lingnan as soon as possible to quell the war." Zhou Yuan closed his eyes. This is a great move to cut corners. If it weren't for his awakening of the system, how could he have passed this level? Fortunately, there is no ifs in this world. Zhou Yuan suddenly opened his eyes and said decisively, "If the border army does not enter the border, it is the imperial decree of the late emperor. It goes without saying." Yuwen Gong sneered coldly. "How is your Majesty prepared to handle it? The frontline military situation is urgent. If not handled, it may not take 6 months for the White Lotus sect to attack the city. Even if we call up the border army again, it may not be enough time. Or is it to say that your Majesty intends to rely on the wine bags and rice bags of the Kyoto 4 guards to suppress the White Lotus sect?" Before Zhou Yuan could speak, Zai Feichen narrowed his eyes and spoke. "The 4 guards cannot be moved lightly. The underlying meaning is simple. As long as there is no accident in Kyoto, the 4 guards will not move." Compared to the chaos caused by the border army entering the border, he was more worried about the movement of the 4 guards, giving Yuwen Gong an opportunity to take advantage of it. Zhou Yuan snorted coldly. "No need for the 4 guards, come and meet Xuanjia in Chengdu." Wang Zhen didn't move. He has never heard of this before. Yuwen Chengdu, with the compound surname Yuwen, is he from the Yuwen family? That's not right. Judging from Yuwen Gong's appearance, you know he hasn't heard of it either. Zhou Yuanmei frowned. "Why, Duke Wang, can't I even promote myself?" The big hammer's eyes were bloodshot. As a character summoned by the system, he has absolute loyalty to Zhou Yuan. He cannot tolerate the humiliation of his subjects and their death. Noticing the gaze of the big hammer about to kill, Wang Zhen snorted lightly before saying, "Xian, meet Yuwen in Chengdu." Immediately, a young eunuch loudly recited the praises. "Xian, meet Yuwen Chengdu." Among the courtiers, Lu Wenhan was guarded by the samurai in front of the palace, but still couldn't help but widen his eyes. Your Majesty's actions today frequently exceeded his expectations. I don't know who Yuwen Chengdu is, can you help His Majesty get out of this predicament? Some old ministers whispered softly. Lord Chang, what is the relationship between Yuwen Chengdu and the Yuwen family? Chang Hongyuan, one of the servants of the 9 ministers who had not dared to stand up before, also lowered his voice and said. It doesn't really matter, perhaps it's a master trained by the late emperor for His Majesty in recent years. It seems that our Majesty still has some hidden means. Let's take a closer look. Perhaps I can still be saved. If there is hope, then it will be time for us to be loyal. Yuwen Gong rested his hand on the sword, with a strong killing intent on his face. Yuwen Chengdu. With just these 4 words, how can he make the other person feel better? Dare to impersonate someone from his Yuwen family. Today, he will be killed. Just as everyone was having different thoughts, the sound of metal armor colliding outside the hall rang out. I saw a tiger general wearing a double phoenix golden helmet and a lock gold armor walking from outside the hall. This person is walking like a dragon or a tiger, with an elevated posture and an electric gaze. Even before speaking, let the servant Chang Hongyuan secretly applaud. What a tiger general! Chen, Yuwen Chengdu, meet your Majesty. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. 30 days later, the city will offer wine. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. 30 days later, the city will offer wine. Yuwen Chengdu knelt on one knee and clasped his fists. Zhou Yuan laughed heartily. Get up, you and General Yuwen Gong share the same surname as Yuwen and belong to the same clan. You can get closer and closer in the future. Yuwen Chengdu looked at Yuwen Gong with a sneer and a disdainful expression on his face. Chaotic officials and thieves, I wish I could eat their meat and blood. Upon hearing these words, Chang Hongyuan was immediately stunned. Yuwen Chengdu, his brain is broken, he dares to speak like this. Do he really think the current emperor can keep him? As expected, Yuwen Gong was furious. Bastard! He let out a roar and unsheathed his long sword. Someone, pull this thief out and behead him outside the palace. Yes. As soon as the command from Yuwen Gong was issued, a samurai in front of the palace immediately appeared. Yuwen Chengdu's gaze remained cold. With his Yuwen Chengdu here today, how can anyone insult His Majesty? Since your Majesty has summoned him here, he is here to help His Majesty establish his authority. A few samurai in front of the palace, without even looking at Zhou Yuan, drew their swords and rushed towards Yuwen Chengdu. To become a samurai in front of the palace, each of them has a 5th grade cultivation. If they follow the army, they already have the qualification to become a brave general. But the next second, Yuwen Chengdu saw a few people rushing towards him and suddenly punched. Boom! With a loud explosion, the fighting spirit surged. The person who was targeted instantly had a hole in their body. The other samurai in front of the palace were also shaken by the fist wind, flying backwards and hitting the ground heavily, losing their breath. Many people suddenly have a pause in their breath. That's a 5th grade palace warrior. Even if you are a 3rd level expert, it is impossible to be completely shocked to death just by your martial arts skills. Killing a few people with just one punch, is this kind of force another 2nd level expert? Your Majesty, surprisingly, there is such a heritage. For a moment, the few remaining upright ministers were overjoyed in their hearts. With the protection of 2 2nd-level masters, as long as your Majesty fights steadily, the Qian will still be saved. Killed a few people, Yuwen Chengdu looked at Zhou Yuan. Your Majesty, please forgive me for the crime of manslaughter in the palace. Well done. Zhou Yuan did not conceal anything. It's just a few samurai in front of the palace. If it's troublesome to kill them, what's the point of being an emperor like him? Yuwen Gong's face was ugly. He could see that today the emperor ascended the throne with the intention of relying on the royal family's heritage to establish his power, and he became the outstanding bird. But even if you want to stand up, you still need to be able to stand up. What about 2 second-level soldiers? My son Yuwen Wei is a first-level general with unparalleled military strength. My Yuwen Gong holds 100,000 frontline soldiers. Emperor, what kind of gear are you using? Don't say anything else. Do you think that the rebellion of the White Lotus sect can be solved by 2 second-level warriors? He suppressed his anger and snorted coldly, saying, Your Majesty, what we are discussing now is the issue of the remaining sins of the White Lotus sect. With hundreds of thousands of followers, the White Lotus sect cannot solve it with just a few second-level martial artists. Zhou Yuan glanced at Yuwen Gong. I have already said that the remaining sins of the White Lotus sect do not require the general's care. Speaking, Zhou Yuan looked at Yuwen Chengdu. Yuwen Chengdu listens to orders. I am here. Today, there is a rebellion in the Lingnan White Lotus sect. I appoint you as the Tianbao Grand General, leading the 3,000 Xuanjia army and immediately suppressing the rebellion. My lord, lead the decree. 3,000 Xuanjia soldiers. Many people are once again puzzled. What kind of army is this, and there are 3,000 people, they have never heard of it before. However, Chang Hongyuan considered it for a moment and then stood up. Your Majesty, although I am not sure about the combat power of these 3,000 Xuanjia armies, now we are facing internal and external troubles, and the White Lotus sect is even more powerful. I hope your Majesty will think twice. If the Xuanjia army is not to guard the emperor, please ask the northern army to enter and clear the customs. Speaking, Chang Hongyuan bowed. Zhou Yuan was stunned for a moment. He didn't expect Chang Hongyuan, an old slick, to step forward. But he already understood Chang Hongyuan's advice. I have just ascended the throne, and having 3,000 people in my hand is the trump card for a comeback, and the White Lotus sect is even more difficult to deal with. If I am sent out at this time, it will be meat buns beating dogs. But although Zhou Yuan understood his meaning. But there is no intention of changing. Chang Aiqing, just relax. With General Tianbao present, 3,000 Xuanjia soldiers present, and only the White Lotus sect, you can easily break through with just a flick of your finger. Speaking, Zhou Yuan looked at Yuwen Chengdu. General Tianbao, 2 months is enough. Yuwen Chengdu curved his mouth and said in a trembling voice. 30 days later, I dare to ask your Majesty to bestow a pot of imperial wine. Okay. Zhou Yuan stood up. Lingnan is not close to Kyoto, and the journey alone takes 10 days. Even if the Xuanjia army is elite, it cannot be advanced too long. He should be a bit worried. The one who can speak is Yuwen Chengdu. Although Yuwen Chengdu was a villain in the Sui and Tang dynasties, no one can deny his record of fighting alone in all directions. At this moment, as the emperor of the Great Qian dynasty, what he needs most is military achievements. 30 days later, I will bestow 100 jars of wine at the city head. 3,000 Xuanjia, all rewards. Thank you in advance, your Majesty, my lord. After speaking, Yuwen Chengdu lifted his head and left. Chang Hongyuan opened his mouth, but his Majesty had already made a decision and he couldn't say anything more. He had no choice but to retreat. I let out a deep sigh in my heart. This time, he's in big trouble. Now that his identity has been exposed, if the emperor fails, the Grand Tutor and General will probably be the first to use him as a chicken to kill. But the choice has already been made and cannot be changed. Thinking of this, Chang Hongyuan straightened his waist. Even took a special look at the Grand Tutor. I am a loyal minister, what happened? Zai Feichen sneered. As soon as the emperor ascended the throne, he caught these people out. Just in time, after this matter, he cleaned up these old ministers, and this court is his the final say. Finally, Zhou Yuan looked at Captain Zhao Yan. 2 or more second-level combat abilities should make you more sober. Where is Captain Ting? Zhou Yuan spoke up. Captain Zhao Yan's body trembled, and the expression on his face was like crying. Originally, all he needed to do was to row the water with peace of mind, serving His Majesty while also working for the Grand Tutor. Now Your Majesty has shown his prowess as a hero, clearly unwilling to be a puppet. But the confrontation between several sides put him on the fire. I am here. Zhao Yan's face turned to ashes. I will leave the case of Minister Lu to you. You must handle it impartially, otherwise I will not spare you. My lord, lead the decree. After speaking, Zhao Yanzhan returned to his courtiers with a majestic posture. Many ministers showed sympathy towards him. After finishing speaking to Zhao Yan, Zhou Yuan looked at Zai Feichen and Yuwen Gong. When I first ascended the throne, many things happened in the main hall, even to the point of bloodbath. Today, I am tired. If there is something to report, I will leave the court. No one spoke up. Zhou Yuan glanced at Wang Zhen. If that's the case, then let's retreat to court. Upon hearing this, Wang Zhen shook the dust and shouted in a sharp voice. Step back. On the vast hall, 2 words rolled like thunder, making many people pale. Second grade. Wang Zhen is taking this opportunity to tell everyone that a second-level master is nothing, and so is he. Zhou Yuan's face darkened slightly. He never thought that Wang Zhen was also a second-level expert, and seeing the sudden change in the expression of the big hammer, he knew that the strength of this old eunuch was not as simple as entering the second level. It's difficult. Zhou Yuan felt helpless in his heart. This big dry stall is really not ordinary. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. On the side of the bed, how can others sleep soundly? You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Chapter 6. On the side of the bed, how can others sleep soundly? After retreating from the court, Zhou Yuan returned to the Wenhua Palace. Wenhua Palace is his sleeping quarters. It is also one of the few places where he can obtain freedom. The stall left by the late emperor may be rotten, but it is not without any cultural heritage. In the Wenhua Hall, there was a third-rank eunuch named Duke Wei who watched him grow up. Unfortunately, Duke Wei was seriously injured in his early years and was unable to be promoted to the second rank, which gave Wang Zhen an opportunity to take control of the palace. Let the big hammer wait outside and close the palace door. Zhou Yuan walked to the residence of Duke Wei. Duke Wei was already covered in white hair, and when he saw Zhou Yuan, his eyes filled with pity. Your Majesty, it's not going to be easy on your first day on the throne. It's really not easy. Zhou Yuan gave a bitter smile. Taisher Zai Feichen controls the court, and all officials are afraid. General Yuwen Gong holds military power and leans over the court, and even our palace is controlled by Wang Zhen. Only with you can there be some breathing room. Upon hearing this, Duke Wei's eyes were filled with tears. I hate that the old slave is useless and cannot break into the second level. Otherwise, how could that young Wang Zhen be allowed to act recklessly? If we eunuchs in the palace protect us, Your Majesty, you can feel a little more at ease. Speaking, Duke Wei suddenly let out a sigh. Your Majesty, old servant, I'm afraid there won't be much time left. Zhou Yuan's body shook. Why did Duke Wei say such a thing? Leaving aside the system, the only person he can trust in this palace can be said to be Duke Wei. Now Duke Wei actually says that his time is running out. Duke Wei publicly said. 20 years ago, a thief assassinated the late emperor. In order to protect the late emperor, the old slave had to forcefully break through the barrier and reach the peak of the third grade. However, since then, he has also left a root cause of illness, damaged his foundation, and the second grade is hopeless. Your Majesty thinks that Wang Zhen's young son is not monitoring this Wenhua Palace. It was precisely because he knew that the old slave could not live for long, but he also feared that under the old slave's desperate efforts, we would both lose and suffer, which left us on the front line. But now that the old slave's old illness has recurred, there is no hope of breaking through the second grade, and it may take more than 3 months or less than a month, so he will have to follow the previous emperor. Unfortunately, leaving His Majesty alone in the face of the internal and external turmoil upon hearing these words, Zhou Yuan's heart was moved. Recurrence of old illness. Although he doesn't have any medicine to treat his old illness, he has a foundation-building pill. Foundation-building pills can cast foundations or reshape foundations. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but ask with hope. Duke Wei, if we can rebuild the foundation, will there be hope for Duke Wei to break into the second grade? Duke Wei did not doubt his presence and immediately said arrogantly. The old slave was poor from a young age. After entering the palace, he only learned a basic cultivation method at the age of 17. 20 years ago, at the age of 35, he had already explored it alone and reached the 3rd grade. If it weren't for breaking the foundation, he would have already become a first-level martial artist. If he could reshape his foundation, how difficult would it be to break into the second level? Duke Wei was helpless. The treasure that can reshape the foundation, even the worst, is the holy building pill, but it is a 4th grade pill. The previous emperor searched all over the Great Qian, but there was no one who could refine such a pill. How could they do it? Zhou Yuan smiled. Building a foundation pill, he has it. And not only does he have it, he also has 3 more. Thinking of this, Zhou Yuan flipped his hand and took out a pill. Duke Wei, wait and see what this is. Just in an instant, Duke Wei's spirit flashed. At the moment when this pill appeared, he felt a bit relieved, as if all the old illnesses had disappeared. He certainly knew it was an illusion, but it was not difficult to guess that this pill was extraordinary. Moreover, relying solely on the overflowing medicinal fragrance can make him have such an illusion. Is this the foundation pill? He had a shocked expression on his face. Not bad, it's the building foundation pill. With the building foundation pill in place, can my father-in-law have a chance to enter the second grade and continue his lifeline? Zhou Yuan asked. In less than 3 days, the old slave will definitely be able to break into the second grade. When he said these words, Duke Wei's gaze never left the foundation pill. This thing, but his fate, although he has already acknowledged it, who would be willing to die if he could survive? Zhou Yuan laughed heartily. It seems that the heavens cannot accept my father-in-law yet. I want him to protect me for another few decades. Speaking, Zhou Yuan placed the foundation-building pill in the hands of Duke Wei. Duke Wei held the pill, his eyes trembling. Old slave, old slave. He talked for a while, not knowing what to say. Since that's the case, the old servant dares to use this holy potion and must protect His Majesty, sweep the room clean, and rebuild the Great Qian. Wait a minute. Just as Duke Wei was eager to swallow it, Zhou Yuan stopped him. Duke Wei had some doubts, and Zhou Yuan took out a secret book from his pocket, which was also from the Sunflower Classic system. He didn't know if the Sunflower Scripture was useful for Duke Wei, but at least it was also a precious skill in a world, even if it could be learned by analogy. This cultivation technique was unexpectedly obtained by me and the building foundation pill. It is suitable for people with physical disabilities to practice. Grandpa, you can take a look and see if it is helpful to you. Upon hearing this, Duke Wei had some doubts. However, I still received the Sunflower Scripture. Since it was obtained together with the foundation building pill, I believe it is not inferior. But he is extremely confident in himself and has no intention of truly practicing. But as soon as he opened it, he froze. It took a long time for Duke Wei to shift his gaze. Unexpectedly, there is such a magical cultivation in this world. I will now switch to practicing the Sunflower Scripture. Your Majesty, 3 days later, the old slave will break into the second level. With the help of this skill, he can slay Wang Zhen. Really? Then Wang Zhen is in the second or even above second grade. After going down to court, Zhou Yuan confirmed with the big hammer. The great hammer comes from the system and only has a third-level combat aura. It is only a natural divine power that allows it to fight second level, but compared to the true second-level strong ones, it is much worse. According to the words of the big hammer, Wang Zhen is at least in the middle of the second grade. Nature. If it weren't for this confidence, Wang Zhen's young son wouldn't have been afraid of the old slave for the past 20 years, okay. Zhou Yuan was overjoyed, and then a cold light flashed in his eyes. If that's the case, then let's start cleaning from inside the palace. On the side of the bed, how can others sleep soundly? As the emperor of the Great Qian, life and death cannot be controlled by anyone. After speaking, Zhou Yuan said again. Duke Wei, do you have some capable eunuchs under your command? As soon as Zhou Yuan spoke, Duke Wei understood his meaning. Your Majesty, rest assured that in the next few days, the old servant will search for some delicate and clever young men to pass on the Sunflower Classic. This Sunflower Classic is easy to learn but difficult to master. Even if one lacks talent, they can still reach the fourth level. If there are some talents, it is not difficult to reach the third level directly. Duke Wei touched the secret script. Being able to obtain this item is truly a blessing from heaven, Your Majesty. Leaving Duke Wei, Zhou Yuan returned to his own palace. No matter how good the external force is, it will ultimately be the external force. One's own strength is the most important thing. This time, he received 3 foundation pills, 1 for Duke Wei, and the remaining 2 were not found. However, one of them was naturally intended for his own use. His talent is average. When Yuwen Wei was 18 years old, it is said that he was already in the 5th grade, and Duke Wei practiced at the age of 17. At the age of 18, he entered the 9th grade, which is still due to his shallow cultivation skills. But he has been practicing for more than 10 years, but at the age of 18, he is only in 9th grade, and the gap is not ordinary. However, with the foundation stone, it should be able to narrow their gap a bit. Thinking of this, Zhou Yuan took out a foundation building pill, swallowed it directly, and simultaneously used his martial arts skills. Soon, a piercing pain came from the heart. Zhou Yuan gritted his teeth and insisted on not making any sound. Wu Dao Tianguan is getting harder and harder each time. If he can't even hold on to it, what is the point of cultivating martial arts? I don't know how long it has been. The piercing pain all over the body gradually disappeared. Zhou Yuan only felt that his whole body was filled with fighting energy, freely spreading throughout his body. 8th grade. He spat out these 2 words. A foundation building pill directly transformed him from a 9th grade lower level to an 8th grade middle level. Although it's still nothing in front of experts. But this progress can be said to be exaggerated. And this is not the final result yet. Zhou Yuan took out the Tianyuan pill with his backhand. The foundation building pill was used to shape the foundation, while the Tianyuan pill was used to make people ascend to the sky step by step. If a second-level peak expert takes the Tianyuan pill, they can instantly ascend to the first level. Even if you are a top-notch expert, there is still a chance to break through again. But now, he doesn't care about maximizing any benefits. Strength is what he wants. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Breaking through several levels in a row. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Breaking through multiple levels in a row. Open your mouth and swallow the Tianyuan pill. Zhou Yuan suddenly moved his body. I felt a violent force rushing towards all my limbs. This violent force directly opened up his long-closed muscles and veins. Moreover, this force has just been unleashed. At the same time, Zhou Yuan's aura is also rapidly improving. Zhou Yuan only felt a loud noise inside his body, the violent power that directly made him enter the 7th level of combat energy. At this point, the energy of Tianyuan Dan is still continuously outputting. He didn't feel any pain, he had the foundation shaped by the foundation pill, and now even if he reaches the 4th grade overnight, his muscles and bones can withstand it. But he doesn't have such high expectations either. No matter how strong the Tianyuan pill is, there is a limit, but no one would be so extravagant as to use it on an 8th grade warrior. 7th level lower, 7th level middle, 7th level upper, and then the 6th level pass was once again swept away by the violent power of Tianyuan Dan. Zhou Yuan was extremely excited. He surprisingly entered the 6th grade overnight. The 7th grade still belongs to the 3rd grade, but the 6th grade is already among the 3rd grade in the middle. I don't know where the limit of Tianyuan Dan is, but feeling the fighting energy of his body still crazily improving, Zhou Yuan's heart became even calmer. Boom! There was another explosion. 5th grade, broken. Zhou Yuan's eyes sparkled with essence. However, the power of Tianyuan Dan gradually calmed down, ultimately stabilizing his fighting spirit at the mid-level of the 5th grade. Enough. Zhou Yuan tidied up his mood. One day, one can advance from the 9th grade to the 5th grade, and the world is willing to sacrifice itself. Unfortunately, there is not enough powerful martial arts. Although the Qianyuan fist technique inherited by the royal family is good, it is still at this level and far from the Sunflower Treasure Classic. The Chongqing sword technique is also a common thing on the roadside, and the Qian royal family does not even practice swordsmanship. Without strong martial arts skills, one cannot unleash one's strength. Host. Zhou Yuan identity. Emperor Daqian level. 5th grade medium skills. Qianyuan fist technique, Chongqing sword technique D-Wei value. 1130 characters. Big hammer, Yuwen Chengdu army. 3000 Xuanjia army, 500 Euphorbians. The emperor's power has once again exceeded 1,000, probably due to the sudden appearance of Yuwen Chengdu and the 3000 Xuanjia army. However, this is just the beginning. When Yuwen returns from Chengdu and gives wine at the city head, he is sure to reap a huge wave of imperial power. As for now, he did not draw a lottery. Although he lacks martial arts skills now, the lottery is full of uncertainty. With over 1,000 imperial power points, he can draw once. As for using the minimum draw, he has no idea. Although the foundation pill is good, can it compare to Yuwen Chengdu? Not to mention anything else, just the 2 words, guosher, after the 1st grade surpass everything. Guosher, the person who controls the country. This is a saying that has been passed down on this continent for countless years, that one can secure the world. Whether a country is strong or not depends entirely on whether there are patriots within the country. Why is he always being bullied by people when he is young? It's because there are no national soldiers stationed. After Duke Wei breaks through and solves the problem of eunuch Wang Zhen and his reputation spreads, perhaps he can make the emperor's power value exceed 10,000 and have a luxurious draw. Perhaps, what will emerge then is not the potential of a national scholar, but the true national scholar. It won't be long. Zhou Yuan was looking forward to it in his heart. The early events began to ferment gradually. Many people just realized that in their eyes, the emperor who was destined to be a puppet actually had the capital to resist. The loyal gentleman was excited, and both the Grand Tutor and the general were shocked and angry. However, no matter what, only a very small number have truly seen Zhou Yuan. The Grand Tutor's mansion, with Zai Feiqian sitting at the top and the lower head, was an official from all sides who came to inquire about the news. Your Majesty, 2 experts with 2nd-level combat power suddenly appeared in Your Majesty's hands, and even an army emerged. This may have an impact on us. The minister spoke with a worried expression. Zai Feiqian held a wine cup in one hand and a wine pot in the other, slowly pouring a glass into the cup. Then he drank it happily and slowly took a bite of Phoenix Point. The soda called Phoenix Point is made from the tongue of a pigeon. For a dish, only the pigeon's tongue is taken, and the rest is discarded, which is his favorite. After chewing and swallowing Feng Jian slowly, he finally looked at the speaker. Mr. Li has been worried too much. Your Majesty is at least the emperor of the Great Qian dynasty. The Great Qian dynasty has been established for 100 years, and some of its cultural heritage is normal. However, these are just hidden means. Since I can't see anyone, how can I come out and face each other squarely? Now, it's just that your Majesty is in a hurry and there's nothing he can do. Don't say anything else. Do you really think that a second-grade warrior with 3,000 big-headed soldiers can strangle the White Lotus sect? This. The ministers exchanged a glance. It's hard to say. Zhou Feichen seemed to know their thoughts and continued, the White Lotus sect is just a small issue. No matter how strong it is, there cannot be a second-level expert inside. The third level is already at its peak. The sudden emergence of Yuwen Chengdu is of second grade, and there is indeed a slight possibility of annihilating the White Lotus sect. But do you think that Yuwen Gong will be watching? You should know the matter of the White Lotus sect, but he deliberately let it go. If the White Lotus sect is suppressed, how will his border troops still enter the border? Zhou Feichen chuckled lightly. The world is not up to Wu Fu, the final say. Upon hearing this, the ministers burst into laughter and stood up. Tai Shi Xingming. As Zhou Feichen had imagined, General Yuwen Gong's face was unsightly. Damn the Emperor's child, please notify me and arrange a few experts to join forces with the White Lotus sect to keep all the Emperor's people in Lingnan for me. On the side, his confidant hesitated and said. General, those people from the White Lotus sect would love to kill all the officers and soldiers. Can they unite with us? Yuwen Gong sneered and said. They have no choice. If they unite, they can still kill Yuwen Chengdu and gain a glimmer of hope. If they don't unite, they can only wait to die. When it came to Yuwen Chengdu, Yuwen Gong's face twitched. He even suspected that this person's name was intentionally used by the emperor to disgust him. But it's okay, anyway, this Yuwen Chengdu will soon die in Lingnan. 3 days passed in a blink of an eye. Everything in the palace is calm. Every morning in the morning court, Zhou Yuan sat in the main hall, listening to the discussions of the courtiers. However, after 3 days, he didn't say a word except for the 4 words Shang Chao and Xia Chao. Zhou Feichen even felt that the emperor might have calmed down. Knowing that resistance doesn't make much sense. But he didn't know that Zhou Yuan was just waiting for the outbreak. There is nothing he can do about Chao Tang. The means of killing cannot be done every day. Second grade, even if it's first grade, it can't be achieved in the Qian. But inside the palace, he is already ready. On this day, Zhou Yuan returned to the Wenhua Palace and headed straight to the residence of Duke Wei. After waiting outside for a long time, suddenly a terrifying aura flashed away. Got it. Just a cup of tea, the door opens wide. Duke Wei walked out from inside, his gray hair turning a bit black. This is also normal. After all, Duke Wei is only over 50 years old and a martial arts practitioner. He shouldn't have had white hair all over his head. Your Majesty, the old servant lived up to expectations and has already entered the second grade. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Death with One Palm. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Death with One Palm. Okay. Zhou Yuan was overjoyed. With Duke Wei present, I have peace of mind. Duke Wei's face also showed a rare smile. Your Majesty, Wang Zhen is cautious. Although the old slave has reached the second grade, it is not an easy task to kill that little one. We still need to plan carefully. If we can introduce it into this Wenhua Hall, it can form a deadly situation. Upon hearing these words, Zhou Yuan frowned. After considering it for a moment, he spoke up. I'm afraid this matter is very difficult. Duke Wei was somewhat surprised. Although Wang Zhen is somewhat wary of himself, he is not afraid to enter the Wenhua Hall. Zhou Yuan continued. Duke Wei is somewhat unaware that I have accumulated some knowledge over the years. When I ascended the throne, I showed a bit of the power to strengthen the emperor. Speaking, Zhou Yuanlang said in a voice. Hammer, come in now. Yes, your majesty. A rumbling sound sounded. The big hammer walked in, and Duke Wei was shocked. What a tiger general. Even if he had never taken action, he knew that this person's strength was not weak. The great hammer has a third-level combat energy, but it is only a divine power of the heavenly god and has a second-level combat power. Zhou Yuan's eyebrows and eyes carried a hint of laughter. Although the exposure of the big hammer added some variables to the matter of killing Wang Zhen, how could he be so reassured these days without the big hammer? Upon hearing these words, Duke Wei's eyes flickered and he suddenly became troubled, slapping the big hammer with his palm. This move was extremely fast, but the big hammer still reacted and he didn't use the hammer, just punched back. Bang! Fists and palms intersect. Duke Wei retreated 7 or 8 steps, but the large iron hammer remained motionless. Although he was the first to launch the challenge, he only used 7 or 8 points of strength, and his expertise was not in strength. Okay. Duke Wei was overjoyed. With such brave warriors guarding your majesty, the old servant can also rest assured. The big hammer's face was solemn. My father-in-law has extraordinary strength, and I admire the big hammer. The move just now seemed to have given him the upper hand, but Wei Gonggang's ghostly speed left a deep impression on him. And this is not the other party's full strength. If he really puts in all his strength, he may not be able to react. Seeing the two of them probing and acknowledging each other, Zhou Yuan was also very happy, and the last hint of doubt in his heart completely disappeared. Your Majesty. Duke Wei looked at Zhou Yuandao. With the big hammer around, that little brat will definitely not step into the Wenhua Palace for half a step. He is afraid that the old slave and the big hammer will join forces to kill him. But we still need to set up a game for that little kid to get in. The eunuchs of all sizes in the palace are under the control of that little brat. If we don't do a good job, if we let him run away, the consequences will be unimaginable. Wait until he kills his old slave before coming forward, and then things in the palace will naturally be easier to handle. However, even so, the Empress Dowager still needs to be careful. Zhou Yuan nodded. The Empress Dowager is the sister of Zai Feichen. Originally, the Qian did not hold the position of Grand Tutor. It was precisely because of Zai Empress Dowager that the Qian gained such a civil servant leader out of thin air. I will look for an opportunity, but before that, I have asked Duke Wei to be wronged and hide here. Not aggrieved, not aggrieved. Duke Wei opened his mouth with a smile. The old servant stayed in this palace for 7 years without going out, so it's okay to stay a little longer. In these 7 years, the late emperor fell seriously ill. In order to protect the late emperor, he never left the Wenhua Palace for half a step. And now the person he guards has been passed down as His Majesty today. 2 more days passed in the blink of an eye. Zhou Yuan rested on the couch. Suddenly, a sharp sound sounded. Your Majesty, it's time to go to court early. Zhou Yuan suddenly opened his eyes. Bold. The speaker was the trusted eunuch under eunuch Wang Zhen, and also the eunuch Xiao Dingzi who had been taking care of his daily life. However, these days, his daily life has always been managed by a young eunuch who has practiced the sunflower scripture. He didn't expect that in just 2 days, this person would dare to come and test him. Where is Gui Yuaner? Zhou Yuan asked. Gui Gonggong is feeling unwell today. Let me serve His Majesty as a servant. Upon hearing these words, Zhou Yuan became furious. Gui Yuaner was chosen by Duke Wei's fingertips and learned the Sunflower Classic. How could Wang Zhen's trusted eunuch take care of his daily life? Besides, how dare Gui Yuan decide this matter without asking herself? Something's wrong. Zhou Yuan reacted. Where's the big hammer? Why didn't you speak? Thinking of this, Zhou Yuan stood up straight without changing clothes and walked straight outside. The palace gate opened wide, and a dozen eunuchs outside knelt respectfully on the ground. Just beneath this respect, there is a deep disdain hidden. Xiao Dingzi, you have a lot of courage. I dare not. Xiao Dingzi's sincere and fearful reply, but his voice never trembled at all. Even lifted his head and looked at Zhou Yuan. Your Majesty, how about having servants take care of your Majesty's daily life in the future? Not much, Guan. Zhou Yuan's voice was indifferent. I'm sick. What a sick person. He's sick. Why don't I know that bastard Wang Zhen really keeps a bunch of good dogs? The eunuchs did not speak, but they did not leave. Xiao Dingzi lowered his head, but felt a hint of disdain in his heart. What about the emperor? Without a prince, how could you still sit comfortably in this position? If it weren't for Wang Gonggang asking him to save face for the emperor, with his 5th rank combat power, how could he kneel in front of this useless person and show such sincerity and fear? Looking at the little dang in front of him, Zhou Yuan also knew his thoughts and a cold light flashed in his eyes. Since you're unfaithful, what's the use of you as a lackey? Upon hearing these words, Xiao Dingzi immediately raised his head. The emperor wants to kill. That barbarian has already fallen into the trap of luring a tiger away from the mountain. Why did you, the useless emperor, kill me? Just as the thought flashed, I saw a palm force attacking me. Xiao Dingzi's pupils contracted slightly. He never expected that Zhou Yuan would personally take action, and this power had at least reached the level of 5th grade. To calculate with one's heart but without one's heart. Xiao Dengzikong has the power of the 5th grade, but he cannot fully unleash it. Under one palm, die on the spot. In an instant, all the eunuchs and palace maids looked horrified. Deng Gonggang died like this. Zhou Yuan looked at the remaining eunuchs and let out a soft snort. Pull down this useless corpse and feed it to the dog. Ask Wang Zhen to send Guan back intact to me. Otherwise, I will execute him. After speaking, Zhou Yuan returned to the palace and with a push of his palm, the palace door closed tightly. Go to court. Now this big dry. What's the difference between going to court or not? Returning to the palace, Duke Wei walked over with a surprised expression on his face. Your Majesty, you have surprised the old servant more and more. 5th grade power. This is the 5th grade at the age of 18, and it's not yet a newcomer. At the age of 18, Yuwen Wei was only 5th grade. He is looking forward to the future when the emperor of the Great Qian will be promoted to the 1st grade. I don't know how strong the Great Qian was at that time. On the other side, Wang Zhen looked at the corpse in front of him, his face uncertain. Unexpectedly, the emperor not only cultivated 2 2nd-grade combat forces in the dark, but also a trusted army, and even cultivated himself into a 5th grade force. On the side, the trusted eunuch was shocked. Wang Gonggang, are you sure it's the 5th grade? Of course, Xiao Dingzi had already reached the 5th grade last year. Even if he suddenly encountered difficulties, without the power of the 5th grade, he could not have been killed in one blow. Our emperor has hidden himself very deeply. Wang Zhen paced back and forth several times. If you're not dead, just send Guan back. If not as expected by our family, the old man from the Wenhua palace is about to die, so the emperor is anxious and wants to jump out of the cage before that. When the old man dies, our family will have the final say in this palace. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Situ. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Situ. That evening, Guan was sent back. Your Majesty. Seeing Zhou Yuan, Guan Yuan immediately burst into tears, making Zhou Yuan feel annoyed. Alright, you're so grown up, why are you crying? Who makes our family a eunuch? Guan Yuan suppressed her tears and then respectfully bowed to Duke Wei. Ancestor. Duke Wei nodded. Be vigilant in the future. Now that you are following your Majesty, this is the best opportunity, but you should also be aware of the dangers involved. I may come back this time, but not the next time. Guan Yuan nodded and said with hatred. This time it was our family's carelessness. Next time, we will make sure they never come back. Now he is transitioning to the Sunflower Classic, and his original cultivation level of 6th grade is only one step away from 5th grade. Combined with the eerie nature of the Sunflower Encyclopedia, he has confidence that once he breaks through, even if it's a 4th grade, he won't be able to easily capture him. And there are not many 3rd-level masters in this palace. The incident with Guan Yuan is just a minor incident. As Zhou Yuan had imagined, little Dingxi's death did not cause any waves at all. But Zhou Yuan has no intention of dragging it on. Although Yuwen Chengdu is currently out, his strength can be said to be at its lowest point. But similarly, now is also the time when several parties are most wary of him. After a while, when the 3 parties figure out his details, that will be the real big trouble. So he must take action before the 3 parties react. Tomorrow I will set up the Shangyun Palace and meet with the Empress. Since Wang Zhen is backing down, it's time for him to be a bit tough. It's best if Wang Zhen can't help it. With the presence of a big hammer in Duke Wei, it happened to completely kill this servant. Shangyun Palace. Empress Situ looked at the palace gate. Xia He, when is it now? The maid Xia He beside her spoke up. It has been half a month since you last met His Majesty. Upon hearing this, for half a month, Situ sighed. Half a month, that means it will take another half a month to see your Majesty. Perhaps your Majesty will come soon, Xia He comforted. Situ smiled. How could it be so easy? Now that the eunuch Wang Jinshuan is in charge of the harem, the eunuch is in charge of the court, and the great General Yuwen Gong is proud to support his troops. Your Majesty is in a difficult situation, and even on the day of his ascension, our palace cannot leave this Shangyun Palace. The more he spoke, the more tears welled up in Situ's eyes. Unfortunately, her father and brother were seized of power for helping His Majesty, otherwise His Majesty would not have been in such a situation. Suddenly, Xia He's voice rang out. Madam, your Majesty is here. Situ chuckled lightly. Xia He, stop making trouble. Your Majesty cannot. Before the words could finish, Zhou Yuan's voice had already sounded. What's impossible? Your Majesty. Situ looked at Zhou Yuan in surprise. Zhou Yuan smiled and embraced Situ in his arms. Seeing Zhou Yuan so bold, Situ also blushed with embarrassment. Your Majesty, there is someone. She lowered her voice. Seeing Situ's shy appearance, Zhou Yuan laughed heartily and joked. What are you afraid of? The entire Qian dynasty belongs to me. Is my empress still afraid of being seen? That's different. Situ's voice was still not high, but she curled her head in Zhou Yuan's arms. Zhou Yuan didn't hesitate and fiercely pinched Situ's face. I have to say, it's very tender. Situ is definitely a top-notch beauty, staying in Shangyun Palace all year round, with a hint of melancholy on her body, making her irresistible. But when I came over today, besides getting intimate with Situ, Zhou Yuan also had important things to attend to. Your Majesty, why did you come today? Situ hesitated, somewhat unsure how to speak. I can't say, Your Majesty, you're not under control. How could you come here? Zhou Yuan didn't have any concerns and snorted lightly, saying. Why can't I come over? If that bastard Wang Zhen comes to cause trouble, it's exactly what I want. Upon hearing these words, Situ became somewhat anxious. Your Majesty, the power within Wang Zhen's palace is extraordinary. Now that your Majesty has just ascended the throne, it will take some time for you to endure. Zhou Yuan smiled and said. Empress, don't worry. I haven't lived in vain these years either. I still have some wealth in my life. Now I really wish Wang Zhen were careless and gave me a chance to kill him. Duke Wei. Zhou Yuan suddenly let out a cry. The old slave is here. I don't know where he came from, but Duke Wei suddenly appeared and walked over with a smile on his face. Situ naturally knew about the existence of Duke Wei, and upon seeing Duke Wei, Situ was shocked. Grandpa, how did you leave the Wenhua palace? Suddenly, she widened her eyes. You. She guessed a possibility. Thanks to your Majesty's blessings, the old slave has already broken into the second rank. Second grade. Situ was stunned and then reacted, her face full of surprise. No wonder your Majesty dares to come over. As far as she knows, the eunuch Wang Zhen, who had the power to lean towards the harem, was only of second grade strength. With Duke Wei present, your Majesty finally has hope to break free from his cage. Thinking of this, Situ stood up and bowed respectfully to Duke Wei. Your Majesty's safety is left to the father.in.law. Duke Wei avoided this ritual. He understood the Empress's meaning, but he could not accept this gift, otherwise there would be no distinction between superiority and inferiority. The Empress is too worried. Your Majesty's safety does not require an old servant to take responsibility. Your Majesty's methods are beyond the imagination of Wang Zhen, that little brat. If he dares to cause trouble, the old servant will definitely kill him. Upon hearing this, the Empress also realized that your Majesty may still have experts around her. Noticing the gaze of Situ Zhou Yuan nodded. Now, that Wang Zhen is just a small trouble, the key big trouble is another one. Zhou Yuan's eyes carry profound meaning. With Situ intelligence, he immediately understood his meaning. Empress Dowager. It seems that the eunuch Wang Zhenxuan is leaning towards the harem, but when it comes to the harem, there is still someone who cannot be avoided, and that is the current Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager is not the biological mother of His Majesty, but the biological sister of Grand Tutor Zai Feiqian. Two people, one inside and one outside, this is the reason why Zai Feiqian's power leans towards the court. Even Wang Zhen had to shy away from these siblings. Dar, can you contact General Situ? This. Situ hesitated for a moment before saying. On the Empress Dowager's side, there have been people monitoring the Shanyun Palace, but recently it will be my father Situ Xuanran's birthday. At that time, I may be able to use this as an excuse to meet with my father and brother. Enough. Zhou Yuan nodded. I want to kill Wang Zhen, but once Wang Zhen dies, the Empress Dowager will definitely react and do something wrong. I need you to contact General Situ's father and son. If there is any action outside the palace, help me stop it and guard the palace city. Situ nodded with a worried expression in her eyes. She actually wanted to tell His Majesty that her father and brother have been idle at home since the last incident. But she also knew that this might be His Majesty's only chance to turn the tables. Your Majesty, rest assured that my father and brother will not disappoint Your Majesty's expectations. Upon receiving the promise from Situ Zhou Yuan breathed a little sigh of relief as he knew about the situation of the Situ family. But even if one loses real power, it is still possible to attract a group of people into the city. At that time, the 500 Euphorbians will be his henchmen. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Chengdu Unmatched, Invincible Xuanjia. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 Chengdu Unmatched, Invincible Xuanjia. In the blink of an eye, a few days had already passed. The weather is a bit cold. This year is a disaster year, with frequent droughts and floods in various parts of the region, resulting in a nearly half decrease in harvest compared to previous years, and many people in certain areas are struggling to make ends meet. This is also the reason why the White Lotus sect swept across the 3 counties. Zhou Yuan looked at the withered yellow leaves and couldn't help but think of Yuwen Chengdu. Calculating the schedule, Yuwen Chengdu and the 3,000 Xuanjia army should have already arrived in Lingnan. I don't know if Yuwen Chengdu can do everything he said and lead his army to a great victory on the 30th. And now in Lingnan. Yuwen Chengdu holds a phoenix-winged gold-plated tang and sits on a 1,000-mile yellow flower horse, so majestic. General, we have already entered Lingnan. A mysterious armored soldier comes over. Yuwen Chengdu nodded, his face calm. Be careful, brothers. We're not just dealing with a White Lotus sect. He was very clear about the situation and naturally knew that Yuwen Gong could not watch him eliminate the White Lotus sect. I walked for a while again. Suddenly, banners fluttered ahead, word for word soaring. Yuwen Chengdu waved his hand and the 3,000 Xuanjia soldiers stopped. Sure enough, the White Lotus sect was already prepared. There are at least tens of thousands of White Lotus followers in front of us. With a shout from the White Lotus sect, a man dressed in the sect leader's uniform chatted with the 2 people beside him. That's Yuwen Chengdu. There was a faint disdain in his eyes. And the 2 people around them were experts from the general's mansion. The leader of the White Lotus sect is already a 3rd-level expert, and both experts are also 3rd-level experts. Although 3 3rd grade cannot kill 1 2nd grade, it is not difficult to block them. And this time, he gathered a whopping 100,000 soldiers. It can be said that the entire White Lotus sect has poured out its strength. He wants to achieve success in one battle. After killing the 2nd rank and 3,000 Xuanjia soldiers in front of him, he taught and left to Qian. When the time comes, the world is vast and there is no place to go. It looks a bit brave, but unfortunately, I'm going to die here. The 2 3rd-level masters of the general's mansion also sneered. Just a bastard who dares to take on the name of Yuwen. But he's quite brave. When he saw us, he didn't even run for our lives quickly. The other person laughed heartily. Isn't this just right? If he wants to leave, it's really difficult for us to kill him before the army surrounds him. But at this moment, Yuwen Chengdu held high the phoenix-winged gilded tang. The 3,000 Xuanjia soldiers remained silent and raised their swords at the same time. Kill! Yuwen Chengdu let out a roar. Sitting down for 1,000 miles, the yellow flower horse bounced out and galloped towards the 1,000,000 White Lotus sect. 3,000 Xuanjia soldiers followed closely behind. Fear. It doesn't exist. This battle is destined to have the name Yuwen Chengdu, together with the 3,000 Xuanjia army, become famous in the Great Qian. Arrogant. The White Lotus sect leader let out a cold snort. Kill. 100,000 members of the White Lotus sect began to charge, and as soon as the 3,000 Xuanjia army saw it, they were all enemy troops. But so what? As the 2 armies were about to collide, Yuwen Chengdu arched his bow and shot an arrow. The terrifying power instantly permeates a 5th-grade White Lotus sect member. Then the force of the arrow continued, crossing over a dozen people before falling to the ground. Everyone is shocked. Is this something that humans can do? The 3 major 3rd-level masters do not hesitate, only the strong can block such a strong one. A 3rd-rank general in the military mansion holds a giant axe. Go to hell. He let out a roar, and his 3rd-level combat aura erupted, raging with a terrifying aura. Yuwen Chengdu let out a cold snort, holding a phoenix-winged gold-plated tang, sat down for 1,000 miles, and the yellow flower horse hissed as it charged straight towards this 3rd-grade powerhouse. Boom! With a loud explosion, the phoenix-winged gilded tang collided with the giant axe. In the next moment, the 3rd-level master suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground, unaware of life or death. How could it be? The White Lotus sect leader was shocked. Even if Yuwen Chengdu is a second-level powerhouse, how could he possibly defeat the third level in one move? But then, he saw the most terrifying scene of his life. Yuwen Chengdu is full of fighting spirit. First grade. A peerless masterpiece. Without giving him a chance to react, Yuwen Chengdu stepped on a 1,000-mile yellow flower horse and rushed towards the two of them. Death. Yuwen Chengdu let out a loud roar. The phoenix-winged gold-plated tang smashed towards the two of them. Block it. The head of the White Lotus sect is about to crack his eyes and wants to work with another person to block this blow. But, with a loud bang, the two of them flew backwards at the same time, spitting blood from their mouths. Yuwen Chengdu glanced behind him. The 3,000 Xuanjia armies are all 9th-grade warriors, and they are both fierce and fearless of death. The battle against these soldiers, who were just ordinary people not long ago, can be considered a massacre. The leader of the White Lotus sect has died. Those who surrender will not be killed. The rolling battle aura carried thunder throughout the battlefield. What about a 100,000-strong army? In this battle, Chengdu is unparalleled and Xuanjia is invincible. In the deep palace, Zhou Yuan looked at the system. Host. Zhou Yuan identity. Emperor Qian level. 5th grade medium skills. Qianyuan fist technique, Chongqing sword technique D-way value. 2,598 characters. Big hammer, Yuwen Chengdu army. 3,000 Xuanjia army, 500 Euphorbians. Over the past few days, his imperial power has been slowly increasing. However, not long ago, there was a sudden surge of improvement. After thinking for a moment, I'm afraid only when the Battle of Lingnan begins and Yuwen Chengdu wins, can this possibility exist. Winning. Zhou Yuan breathed a sigh of relief. Next, as long as Yuwen Chengdu leads the Xuanjia army back, even if the domestic situation is still deteriorating, it will not be as difficult as it is now. But no one will make him wait quietly. Wang Zhen. Zhou Yuan silently recited the name in his heart once. Today is the birthday of Situ Xianran, and I don't know if Situ has entered the Situ mansion. Outside the palace, Situ and several palace maids walked to the city gate, but were stopped by several guards. Seeing this scene, Situ's face turned pale with iron. Today is my father's birthday in this palace. As Empress Dowager Qian, I can't even meet my father and brother once. No matter what Situ said, the guard in front of the door remained unmoved. Bold, do you really think that this palace dare not kill people? Situ was angry, so she didn't believe it anymore. She can't even leave this palace today. Upon hearing these words, a eunuch leisurely walked over. Madam, please don't make things difficult for these forbidden guards. They are just following orders. Seeing the person coming, Situ's pupils shrank. Zhou Gonggang, why are you blocking this palace too? Situ was a bit anxious. This week, my father. In law is the confidant of eunuch Wang Zhen, possessing a third-rank combat power. If he were to stop her with determination, she wouldn't be able to leave today. The empress misunderstood. Zhou Gonggang said something. I came just to remind the empress that it's not easy for her to meet her father and brother, so don't make a mistake. After speaking, Duke Zhou waved his hand and the guard finally gave way. Humph, don't bother Duke Zhou. Situ snorted coldly and returned to the phoenix carriage, saying in a beautiful voice. Get off at the Situ mansion. Watching Situ move away, Duke Zhou sneered. It seems that your majesty really has no choice but to rely on two generals without military power. However, when this matter passes, your majesty should also accept his fate. If you want to survive in the Great Qian palace, you still have to rely on our Duke Wang. Thinking of his pride, Duke Zhou couldn't help but burst out laughing a few times. Eunuchs. What's wrong with the eunuch? Even as a eunuch, there are times when he becomes the head of the family. Even the emperor can only be allowed to bully him at will. End of this chapter.